Whenever you take an astronomy class, at some point in time, you're going to look at star charts, whether these are going to be printed or online or even an app that you might have on your phone or tablet. Now, the star charts tell us an awful lot, and I want you to be familiar with some of the information that is out there right in this first chapter. So on any individual star chart, if there are dots, the dots, of course, represent the stars. But the size of the dot is an indication of the brightness of the star. So this is a star chart of Orion, the hunter. His three little stars of his belt, his bow, and his raised sword arm. And the brightest stars in Orion have the biggest dots. So there is Rigel, and there is Betelgeuse. You might be familiar with the name Betelgeuse. There was an old movie named Betelgeuse. One of the other very bright stars in Orion is Bellatrix. Again, another Harry Potter reference. It's one of the multitude of reasons I love Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling's used a lot of really good astronomy woven inside of that. So I found that quite fascinating and wonderful. So if you see a little star on a star chart, that's an indication it's not so bright. It's there, but it's not so bright. And the biggest ones have the biggest blobs, okay? Now, these star charts back here, as we looked at them, had numbers. See where it says numbers here? What do those mean? Those actually mean the magnitude of the stars. Back, over 2,000 years ago, there was a Greek fellow. His name was Hipparchus. And Hipparchus, if you've ever taken a course in trigonometry, Hipparchus is the fellow who invented that kind of geometry. But he figured out a way to actually quantify or put a number with how bright stars appear to be when we see them from the Earth. This is not how bright they actually are, but how bright they appear to be. So he said the stars that were the brightest, he called them first magnitude stars. Less bright, second magnitude, and so on down the pike. So the brightest stars out there are first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. You need to know this. The dimmest stars that we can see with the naked eye are sixth magnitude stars. So if you look at something, let's say a distant quasar. Quasar we'll talk about later in the semester. Quasars, the brightest ones, have magnitude of 7. Can you see those with the naked eye? You cannot. You have to have a telescope to see a quasar. You cannot look out with your naked eye. So if you're dating somebody and he or she says, yeah, there's a quasar up there, it's right there, I can see it. Well, they're goofing with you. Because anything with a magnitude with a number larger than 6, you cannot see with the naked eye. To keep this straight, this is the way I think about it. Think of the brightest stars as the first magnitude is kind of like first class. If you're traveling first class, that's the best there is. The next one down's a little bit dimmer. That's kind of like second class. I don't know about you, but that's kind of where I'm typically traveling. And then as they get dimmer and dimmer, they get to be third class. I don't want to travel far in this situation, and then so on to smaller and smaller classes of stars. Now, Hipparchus lived about 2,000 years ago. We have gotten smarter. And as we quantify and put some scientific data to how bright stars are, not just, I think that one looks brighter than that one, astronomers have come up with a modern scale of apparent magnitude. And this is a chart from your textbook, and that's what this indicates. If you have a magnitude of 0, then it's pretty bright. 1 is less bright. By the time you get to 5, it is less bright. And 6 is the faintest things we can see with the naked eye. The challenge is, when astronomers did this, they found that some stars were actually brighter than 0. So what did they do? They put negative numbers on the brightest objects. So if you go to Sirius, Sirius is in the Big Dog star constellation, Canis Major, and it is the brightest star in the night sky. It has a apparent magnitude of negative 1.5. Our moon has an apparent magnitude of negative 12.5. And of course, the brightest thing in the night sky, or the day sky, of course, is the sun with a magnitude of negative 26.8. So let's go back here for a second. Let's say we had a quiz and I asked you this question. I had a star that was a -4, a star that was a 2, and a star that was a 5. Those were apparent magnitudes. Which one is going to be the brightest? Which one is the brightest star? The star with an apparent magnitude of -4. It's a little wacky, but that's how that works. When you take a look at star charts, there's another way they indicate, besides size, when they're naming a star, they can sometimes have traditional names. Now, this is Gemini, the constellation Gemini, the twins. And there are traditional names for the two brightest stars in that constellation, Pollux and Castor. But scientists, to be more specific, have given names for that star that an indication of what is the brightest and what is the next brightest and third brightest and fourth brightest. And what they use is the Greek alphabet. Now, you may be familiar with Greek alphabet from different math classes or science classes you have taken. The only letters that I'm going to ask you to be familiar with are the first 4. This is kind of like A, B, C, and D in the Greek alphabet: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. Now, alpha kind of looks like a little a, beta sort of looks like a little b, gamma looks a little like a skinny fish going south, and delta is just a little weird looking. Kind of looks like a lowercase d, sort of, if you use your imagination. The brightest star in the constellation Gemini is Gemini Alpha. So the Gemini Alpha star is Castor. Okay, Castor is the alpha star, meaning it is the brightest in the Gemini constellation. Okay, what is the next brightest star in the Gemini constellation? That would be Pollux. Pollux is the beta star. All right, take a look. Can you eyeball the third brightest star in the Gemini constellation? Hit pause if you need to on the video. Can you find the gamma? There it is. It's the foot of Pollux. Okay, what about the delta? What about the fourth brightest star in this constellation? Right here, it's the midsection of Pollux. Okay, that's how that works. Let's take a look at another one, Ursa Major. What is the brightest star in the Ursa Major constellation? Can you find it? There it is, Debbie. Okay. Now, can you locate the beta, the gamma, and the delta? And hit pause on the video if you want to look at this for a moment. All right, let's see if we can find these. The beta star in Ursa Major is, I had these, of course, Merak. Merak is right there. The gamma star is Physida. Physida, again, see, that's one of the reasons why we see this Big Dipper so clearly, because the delta star is the fourth part of that Big Dipper. And so it pops out at us when we look at the night sky, because those are the 4 brightest stars in that constellation. This is a list of the brightest stars that exist. The ones with little asterisks by them happen to be in the southern hemisphere, and so you and I are not going to see them. But it lists them. The sun, of course, has an apparent magnitude of negative 26.7. Sirius, the dog star in Canis Major. It is Canis Major Alpha. It is the brightest star in Canis Major. The next one in the northern hemisphere is Alpha Bootes. The constellation Bootes is like a big kite, and Arcturus is the second brightest star in the northern hemisphere. Alpha Lyra contains the star Vega, and I know you've heard some of these words. Capella, I think there's a university called Capella. That is the alpha star in the Auriga constellation. Rigel is the beta star in Orion. Procyon is the alpha Canis Minor, the small dog. That's a southern hemisphere. Betelgeuse is the alpha Orion star. These are southern. Altair is the Alpha Aquila, and Aldebaran is the bright red star in Taurus. You do not need to memorize these stars, but they're kind of superstars. And as we went through these lists, I'm sure you've heard of many of them just because the words are beautiful and they're commonly used. So let's take a look at this. Aldebaran is the bright red star that's the eye of the bull in Taurus. The Betelgeuse is the alpha star in Orion, and that's the red star up here by that sword hand of Orion. This is Orion's foot. That's the beta star, and that's Rigel. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, in the dog constellation, Canis Major. Okay, that will do for stellar brightness. We'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about constellation motion and some other things in a little bit.